tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koe kingi tū heitia. Tēnā koutou katoa, kua hui mai nei runga i te kaupapa o tēnei rau. Ka nui te mihi, ka nui te aroha ki a koutou katoa. Nō reira, i nā rangatira mā, ia aku hoa mahi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you. It is really an honour and a pleasure to be back here in Tainui, and I just want to begin by acknowledging Kiwi in your presentation and the whakatauki that you presented to begin with just resonated really strongly with me because my grandmother always used to tell me when things were really tough, tomorrow is another day with new hopes and new opportunities, and so and tomorrow the sun may shine. So and I think there's so much truth in that. One of the other things that my grandmother used to tell me was that we can learn from all the things that aren't so good in our lives. And she said, so, you know, when tragedy happens or things that aren't so good happening, the most important thing is to take some learning away from that. And I guess that's what's driven me on this. The bringing our hearts with our minds really is a term that Melinda Weber, who co-authored the People's Report with me, and I termed in the People's Report, because what was really obvious to us from all the people's stories, the 500 people who came to talk to the Glen Inquiry, was that people were bringing their hearts. And at times it was really questionable whether they were actually bringing their minds to their mahi. So my presentation is a little bit different today. Kahu rang me and gave me little choice, but to get in my car and come down here, and I'm really glad that she did that. I sit on the Family Violence Death Review Committee, so today I want to share some of the things that we're finding, because when our people go to the helping services, they're not they're getting a raw deal, and I think that there are some things that we can actually learn from the tragedies of the people who have passed as a result of family violence, and to honour their lives by taking some learning from that. And I think, Elizabeth, you really highlighted about access to services and this is across the board. So while a lot of family violence is usually male and female violence, we are very aware that it occurs in same-sex relationships. It is about elder abuse, it is about child to mother violence as well. So there's a whole host of things. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about family violence and what we're learning, and talk about the system responsiveness and some things that we might want to try and just advocate for some change. The cultures of helping services and being better helpers and hearts and minds. So without going into too much, we know that family violence for our whānau is quite complex, and we can't really look at it without actually acknowledging the things like historical trauma, the contemporary socio-economic deprivation that impacts on a lot of our whānau, but also the loss of cultural identity and cultural engagement, because we know that that is just such an important part in strengthening people and who they are. And there's all the other things that a colleague of mine in Canada, she doesn't do any analysis of this work now without actually bringing in intersectionality, which looks at all those multiple oppressions that just are weighting down on whānau and the whānau members. So I sit on the Family Violence Death Review Committee. I've been on it for 4 years, and Mala Grant has been the other Māori member up until last year when her time expired, and Fiona Cram is going to be joining us as the second Māori member. It's one of 5 mortality review committees, and the Suicide Mortality Review Committee is a trial committee. We don't know at this stage whether it's going to continue, and the report is in the process of being finalised and has to go through the approval processes. It has a section on it on rangatahi Māori, so you know, it will hopefully come out in due course and what have you. We look at any unnatural death where the suspected perpetrator is a family or extended family member, caregiver. Oh look, I tried to change something and it's changed everything, so I do apologise. Intimate partner, previous partner, victim or previous victim's partner. It excludes suicides and assisted suicides. We do, however, look at murder-suicides because they are, you know, happen together. We are very acutely aware that family violence is quite tightly associated with suicide, but the problem is in terms of actually how we get the information to look at suicides. We gather all the homicide data, and that's where we start from, and under the powers of legislation we can gather data from every government agency, non-government agency and other service that's actually been involved in that whānau's life. So when we do the in-depth reviews, we're starting to get quite a good picture of how well or not well these families have been served. So these other areas that it excludes, we're aware, but the problem is trying to actually collect the information for it to be meaningful. So what we know is that 1 in 3 New Zealand women experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. For Māori women, some work that Jane Coleshill McLean and her teams did show that it's between 57 to 80%. There's something like just over 90% of those women had children at home. So it is a serious issue. We know that Māori men and Pacific men are probably more like, you know, around 5 times more likely to be offenders of homicide, and Māori 5.5 times and more likely to be a victim, and 13 times more likely to be an offender of an intrafamilial homicide. So that's where there's been some family violence going on and somebody else has got killed in the process. I think, you know, it is a serious issue for our people, and particularly for our children. When we're not actually recognising what's going actually on or providing the support for our mums and our dads in terms of raising their children, but also the wider whānau, you know, it is not helping the situation in any way. So yeah, Kahu said that I needed to talk about realising potential and promoting recovery. But in order for us to do that, we need to have a system in this country that actually is going to work with people in a positive way. So not only do we have services that aren't designed to help our people, we also have people working in them who are less than helpful. And certainly in the Glen inquiry, it just made me want to cry sometimes, people's stories of actually how they were treated. You know, it's like these are human beings in desperate times, and all they're meeting is somebody who's judgmental, bureaucratic, really unhelpful, and just even our country as a society some of the attitudes and things like that. When you read women staying in highly dangerous situations with their children because of the stigma around being on a benefit, and particularly around that time, Paula Bennett was really doing a big thing around beneficiary abuse and stuff like that, which really is only a very small slice of the pie when you actually look at it. So we need helping services that actually understand people's stories and the context of their distress. Because the situations that we're looking at are very complex and chaotic, and so when we do in-depth reviews, we get all that information, and then we've got to look at it and what have you. We take a no-blame approach in terms of we're not actually out about looking at individuals, but what we are about is looking at where in the system and where in the processes can we actually make recommendations to make a difference. So one of the things that we've done, because some of these families are so complex, is that we've developed these things called traumograms. And what we're actually seeing is that we can do several generations, and that not only are the victims of homicide got histories of issues and things back in their whānau as well, and it affects their whakapapa, but so have those who are doing the offending. And we've actually come to a stage now where we talk about primary victim, primary aggressor, because when we put it into victim-perpetrator analysis, we actually put them into two totally separate pots. And what it doesn't recognise is that sometimes people who, like women who kill, in all bar one instance, were the primary victims in the relationship. So, so we've been learning some of the stuff like this. But what we're finding is that there's been multiple patterns of abuse. But we're also needing to, this is reinforced for me, how we need to put more work into our tāne as well, and the support that they need, because often they've been victims somewhere in their lives and that's never been addressed. But we're very quick to lock them up and what have you. So over 50% of our children die under the age of 5. But what's really, really concernful, and I think is really pertinent for us when we're considering suicide, is that from 2009 to 2012, there are 237 children who have either witnessed the homicide of their parent or a sibling, or who were in the house at the same time. And the really, really disturbing part about it is nobody is working with those children at all. So Alan Wade and Kathy Richardson have done some work, and they talk about social responses determining the outcome. So if we get a negative social response when we go to ask for help, then we're more likely to have a negative outcome. So it's really important. Our current system lacks a coordinated response. It doesn't recognise those with family violence histories as either children or adults. There's a lack of education and understanding really the dynamics of family violence that goes from the highest levels to the lowest levels. We go from the people who are making our policies, and it lacks helpers with empathy and compassion. So it really asks you, is anybody out there listening or seeing, and who's doing the safeguarding of people when they're in this situation? So we're also really concerned about how IPV has been framed. So incidents of violence ignores that it's cumulative patterns. The language, and I'll show you some of the language in a minute, but the misuse of the whole thing of empowerment. Empowerment has become a transaction where you come to me, I say, pull out the generic safety plan, I give it to you, you're probably doing half the things on the list anyway, and I can actually close you off my books now because I've done that. When in actual fact we know from the deaths that have happened that when people are asking for help, their level of risk has escalated, and so has the severity and frequency of the violence. So, you know, it's things like it's just a domestic. Well, it minimises and normalises the serious and potentially fatal issues, and it stops people from having to respond. We hear this all the time and see this. It's a mutual act, but in actual fact, domestic violence is a deliberate act of one person on another. It also doesn't see that when a partner engages in violence, that they are acts of resistance, often in attempts to try and protect themselves. An incident of domestic violence, it's a long-term pattern of cumulative harm. It's not just an isolated incident, but we've got systems that silo the incidents. Women should just leave. They are navigating and treating really, really complex, unpredictable and unsafe situations, often that are wrapped up with coercion, threats and control that they can't manage. And the other thing is that some of the research that I've done with our Māori women is that they don't necessarily want to leave the relationship, they just want the violence to stop. And so we need to actually start thinking about, you know, what supports go into the whānau to actually be more effective around that. The problem is that women or mothers are either drunk or stoned or wasted. That's probably really out of date language, but I couldn't think of anything else. But I only took this off my kids. But often what we're finding in all the things that we get from mental health as well is that the use of alcohol and other drugs is often to block out the trauma. Women simply don't want or ask for help. The women who've killed have often asked for help from multiple agencies and multiple people, and it has been documented, but nobody's acted on it. I think this is a real serious issue. When people ask for help, they need it, and they're not getting acknowledged. And I think it's even worse for our Māori women because there's all the racism and things that sits around that. So we need to be really mindful of the language that we use because it conceals violence, it confuses and diminishes the offender's responsibility, it conceals the victim's resistance to that violence, so instead they're seen as passive and accepting of it, but it also blames and apologises people who really need help, and that includes children. I mean, in the Glen inquiry, I tell you what, I just read the most disturbing stories to think how could somebody treat children in this way. So even children are ignored, they are told that they're telling lies, that the person who's doing stuff to them couldn't possibly do that because they're upstanding citizens in the community, or they're just totally ignored. So yeah, and so that tells them that they are, there's something wrong with them. This is an example of, this is an actual piece that was documented, and we've changed a few things. But Rahira and Timothy have a violent relationship. It's characterised by lots of arguing, drinking and fighting. They both get physical. Last night there was a domestic and Rahira got hurt. The agencies were aware that Rahira can give it as good as she can get. So they're mutualising language. They're failing to protect her children from witnessing violence in the home. She needs to leave Timothy and stop drinking so her kids can have a stable environment that's violence-free. Lots of agencies have been involved, but Rahira keeps choosing to stay, so on it goes. When we actually piece it all together, we get a whole different picture. We see that Timothy's been known to multiple agencies for using coercive controlling behaviours. In the past, he met Rahira when she was 15, and he was a bit older than her. I don't know if that's in there, but she had a young child, you know, as a result of rape. So, you know, we're starting to getting a picture here of a very vulnerable young woman who's fallen into a relationship. She starts having, you know, using alcohol to blot stuff out. He attempts to strangle her and things like that. So this is a whole different picture when we actually start looking at the whole context of what's actually going on. And she's at serious risk, well, she was. And we've actually seen that people have said, he's going to kill me. So we need to shift mindsets, get people's stories right, take more trauma-informed approaches. We notice in the mental health area, often they're seen as pathologically unwell, and the trauma is not even acknowledged. And so we need to actually start thinking that often the mental health sequelae from family violence is a result of the trauma. We need more culturally appropriate approaches and better helpers, and more complex, nuanced, you know, responses as well. So we really do need to really start demanding of our people working in these services that they bring their hearts and minds, that they are respectful, that they're compassionate, that they have empathy, and that they're genuine and non-judgmental, because people need, you know, somebody who's not only thinking and doing their job, but actually has got some sort of feeling connection to them. So I know this has just rushed through quite a bit, but you know, a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't help us, and we are seeing that a lot. That it's just, you know, you come in, this is the service we provide you, and this is what you get, whether it suits you or not. We need those working and helping services to identify and support those in need, and workers need to bring their hearts along with their minds. So we're thinking about in our next report around the whole thing around the education of the, you know, the whole workforce across the thing, from the judges. So our chair's doing a lot of work with judges at the moment. It's probably a very long way to go there. But yeah, so we're doing quite a bit of trying to get out and doing things. So, kia mutu, taku kōrero I tēnā wā, kia ora koutou, mō te koutou, whakarongo mai. Nā mihi nui kia koutou, katoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, katoa.